Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to Grozina, and it's lovely to be there. So if you see Sigmar Polke, born in 41 and died in 2010 in Cologne, and you see that the windows are made in 3 years. It's really his last work. It's in 2009 that they were finished. And he, sorry? Niederschlesien, he's born, yes, in Oels, and then he dies in Köln. So it's really his legacy, if you want. And it's in the Grossmunster in Zurich, and the Grossmunster was thought to be a legendary, founded by Charlemagne, Karl the Große, and this is legend, but the main part and the part where Sigmar acts is on the ground floor, and this is all around 1200. And the church was the church which was reformed by Zwingli, and Zwingli was the first pastor there, and the second was Bullinger. We heard Jörg talking about Bullinger writing on Lucrezia. So he was after Zwingli. Zwingli died in 1531 with a sword in his hand, and he was killed in a war. So he was a fighter. And when they reformed it in 1523, Zwingli let all the altar pieces, everything out of the church. And usually they wouldn't destroy the windows, the stained glass windows, because they were part of the architecture, not really to venerate. But we don't know whether there had been windows in there before. Before Polke comes, the windows were like you see there. Nothing in, just kind of a decorative thing. So it was a commission, it was a competition, and lots of, it was from the Canton Zurich, so it was about 20 artists on a long list, and at the end, a short list of 5 artists, 2 Swiss, Sylvie Defroy and Christoph Rüttimann, and from the international artists was Katharina Grosse and Olafur Eliasson and Sigmar Polke. And Sigmar won for very good reasons. I mean, he's the one who works with transparency, translucent things. He was, in the 50s, he was trained as a glass painter before going to the academy at the Düsseldorf Kunstakademie. So he was very familiar with Zurich. He came very often. He had a girlfriend there and friends. He was very important. He really, also people like David Weiss. Fischli was a little younger, but David Weiss was a very good friend, and he really was important as a figure in Zurich, a very inspiring figure. So he knew the Grossmunster since the early 70s. And when he got this commission, and I was in the jury, and I then was asked to be the curator, which was the big present for me to be. He would go very often to the church to look how people move in there. So this is Sigmar walking around and looking how people move. And as always with Sigmar, some coincidence, there was a great master, a Buddhist at a certain moment, and we followed him, and he was going to talk to him. He looked how he worked to know how to arrange his work in there. There is, you see in the back, there is already in the core, in the choir, a big painting. It's by Augusto Giacometti. It's an uncle of Alberto, not first uncle, it's a cousin of the father, Giovanni. Giovanni Giacometti's cousin is Augusto. And he was commissioned to do these windows in as you can see, in 1932. And Sigmar liked them very much. And what he saw is that in the iconographically, there is the birth, the Virgin with the little Jesus here on the floor. So, nativity. And Polke said, okay, I will be in the Old Testament, and I will I will develop my series of 12 windows from the Genesis towards the New Testament, which is that makes that I can be with the Christian, the Jewish, the Islam, who we share more or less the same writing of the Old Testament, so he's not just Christian. And here is this series of windows. He made a really parcours, a very precise parcours. You enter the church from here, and then he made these two windows are old windows from the 18th century. I don't talk about those. Forget those. He came 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. And with the idea of the Genesis, he said, I will work with natural material. And this is agate stone. Agate stone, to talk about creation. Agate stone happen with volcanic eruptions. They make, it's like a bubble in the lava. And it's a very quick moment when this empty bubble happens. And then in millions of years, it crystallizes towards the inside in a agate stone. Agate stones are like big potatoes. I show one, like this is an agate stone here, which has already been cut, but it's like a huge potato, which is then sliced. And you see that it grows inwards. No. And in the middle, sometimes there remains a hole, and even if you cut an agate stone, sometimes you find prehistoric water inside from the moment where it has been captured in this bubble with the gases. So, and he decided, I can talk about Genesis, the creation of the world, by deciding that the first 4 windows represent the elements. And they represent, I haven't got this here. Anyhow, they represent earth here. This is earth, fire, water, and wind. And then there are others we're talking later on. He was very interested in the early Christian churches, like in the Galla Placidia in Ravenna, where they used alabaster windows, but using agate stone is a 20th, or you can only use it after the electricity is invented, because you have to slice them. They are very hard with diamond saws to make kind of like 7 millimeters salami slices almost, so that they are translucent. So this is a technique they could not have done at the time then. They hadn't had the instruments to cut this so like alabaster, which is latte. And he had done a lot of research, also like studying stones, or studying all about this, about 1200, the time of the church. He wanted to use the language of the time and be in the time, not showing now we are in the 21st century, okay. But he wanted to really kind of insert his intervention in the language of the time. So he was very much studying art historical books then. Not only he would like Roger Caillois, the language of the stones, or Antonin Artaud, the Heliogabal, where there was Steinverehrung, worshipping stones in old times, Plinius, and all this. He would study all this to know more about these stones, and he found this was then a coincidence to come on this image of the God being the creator of the world, And this is his world creation, and that is an agate stone that he used. So it's kind of this incredible coincidence in the water window, the blue one. And one thing I want to show you, it's this up on the top of these windows, you have these kind of stones which are called the eye agates. In each of those elements is an eye agate, and here in the water he has this fierce, cold glance. It's like the eye of God he's playing with. So each stone has been chosen by Sigmar. He also had a collection of himself, of the best pieces, and so there's nothing that is a chance how they are grouped together. It's all really to the last detail chosen by him. Here we are, this image. You see also that in his readings, he came, for instance, to Hildegard von Bingen, who writes that agate is also healing you with epilepsy and headaches and skin diseases and all this. He was playing with the healing factor of also agate stones since mainly in medieval times that it had been discussed. So here you see that to cut the agate is a very, very heavy thing to do with this diamond. So, and the big chance that Sigmar had is to find in Zurich a fantastic glass painter. This is Mr. Rickenbach, who kind of tried to fulfill all the ideas that Sigmar had for these windows. And here is Sigmar at the studio of this Mr. Rickenbacher, and laying out the water window. And having organized very well, I helped him to put all together and these agate stones to find the right pieces. That's how it's done. And even the in-between pieces are agate stones. Everything is agate. These ones, you know, between the... And here you see how precise it's like with the jewelry. Every stone was positioned. And then they were bound together in the technique of Bleiverglasung with lead, which was also invented around 1200, Saint-Chapelle in Paris, for instance, one of the first. So he used the technique of the time of this, always this 2000. So here again are these 4 elements which especially look at these eyes up, and then here the window with the air is like a mask, or maybe with the mouth, the nose, the 2 eyes, and the cheek full of air. Here he is. There comes a new element in the Genesis is one, and the other is that he worked with this idea of the prefiguration of things, and he is working from the Old Testament to the birth of Christ with prefigurations of Christ also, using images of prophets and the Son of God, which we will see afterwards. But while already working on the agate stones, he would have this... you want to say something?
Ein Fragezeichen über dahinter.
Yes, because it was destroyed in the war. From this, it's also a word. It's the Jesse-Wurzel, the genealogy of Christ, from Jesse to Christ, and this is the prefiguration of Christ. These figures. Now it came here, King David and all up to him, the genealogy. No? So here you see how he's always had his studies next to the agate stones. Well, and then there's another thing with the prefiguration of Christ. He had this, this tree of Jesse, from Jesse to Christ, and he already in the arrangement of the agate stone started to do the tree, the genealogical tree. This is the fire window. Here you see how much he connected also this window to the Giacometti. This is a part of the Giacometti window in the choir, which is also mit Bleiverglast, with lead around. So this is another window after the four elements, which is a beautiful, bigger window, where he starts to have these elements of, you have to read the stones and just invent you with your own fantasy what it is, figures or like MRE imagery or X-ray imagery. He goes into biology, and it's kind of like already kind of a development in the arrangements, in the choice of the designs of the single slices of the agate stones. And he had some special friends in these agate stones, like this one he's holding. He gave them names. This was Paganini, and Paganini came here, which is it was homage to a painting he did, Paganini. And then there are two more agate stones. It's one when you enter the church. You come from here, through a door below this. This is not the place of this window. It's below. There is the entrance door, and on the other side here, above is this round rosette, and this is like entering. You see the round one below, so it means focusing, getting yourself calm, and so. And when you go out again from the church, you see the lunette, and this is kind of a pop thing, you know. The eyes are like Minnie Mouse's blue eyes or whatever, you know, and it gets to much development in Genesis. No, it's like butterfly or so, and you get also to something which is very important with Polke, the Rorschach, his Rorschach imagery, which he made with this symmetric. So you saw seven agate stones, 7 days of Genesis. So this is pre-human. So this is natural material. And then comes the first window with glass, which is also made out of quartz, of the material that is in the agate stones, actually, usually, you know. Sigmar had a fulgurit, it's called. It's when the lightning goes into the sand, it melts the quartz, and you get like a huge grissini, like that, and that's glass suddenly. So glass is kind of the same material as, in a way, as agate stones. And this is the first of the glass windows with the theme of the Son of God or Son of Man. And it is this figure, Son of Man is this figure between a divinity or the light and the human being. It's above us, no, later. So it has to be a silhouette. It's not, you would not see a color because it's towards the light, it's a silhouette. Or it's a shadow because the sun brings the shadow, the light, God, the sun brings the shadow. So it's this. And it is also this first window about doubt and ambiguity, because do you see the profile first or do you see the calice? No, it's between the calice and it's also the whole discussion about Eucharisty and the quarrel about between Luther and Zwingli. Is the blood, is what you drink, the wine, the actual blood, or is it the symbol of the blood? You know, is it the, yeah? You want to?
I'd like to know where this window is positioned in the space in the church.
Yes, I can show it to you.
Because the church space is organized according to certain liturgical programs. So I would like to see where the doubt is situated.
Yeah, so you go in here, and you have earth, the agates, earth, fire, water, air, and this very complex big MRI, radiographic, and then you have the lunette here, and the all agate. And here in his parcours, in the Prefiguration of Christ, comes this Son of God window, and immediately goes into the theme of doubt and ambiguity there, and naturally also reflecting the separation of day and night, which happened in the second day of Genesis of God, or God's creation. And it's also kind of the Rubinsche Becher, the Gestalt, in the Gestaltpsychologie, you use this image of Rubin. And then you have also, like in the clandestine revolutionary imagery, you have the King Louis XVI, which had been decapitated, and Marie Antoinette, and all those profiles which go there in this clandestine, Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI and the Dauphin and other, which were no more allowed to be represented. And just to say, short before these windows, Polke did this levitation painting, which was exhibited at the Kunsthaus while he was doing the windows. So it's like looking toward this silhouette, in kind of the...
And in levitation, did the people looking up were taken from a film about UFOs?
I don't know exactly where the image, it could very much be kind of an arrival of this thing.
Hollywood film, no?
Yeah, Hollywood film about UFOs.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
About extraterrestrial.
50s.
Yeah.
That was before Smoking Grass.
And I still have a question. On the other the window with the doubt.
Yes.
Could we see it? Go back. The lunette on top.
Yes.
Is kind of counterproductive with the form.
Exactly, it switches.
So it's disturbed. The profile of the Son of God is very grotesque in this kind of version.
It's exactly, it's everything. I mean, the Son of God cannot be, with Polke, idealistic, beautiful, Adamesque, Apollon.
It's sort of Hitchcock in a way, huh?
It resembles Hitchcock.
Alfred Hitchcock. As God,
yeah.
Good God,
Yeah.
good God.
So, I mean, he was also interested in Johann Caspar Laffatter, who was in Zurich and who was also a pastor in the church opposite from the only 200 years later, or even more. So these are the four temperaments by Johann Caspar Laffatter. And there it's again this thing with this clandestine and with the Louis XVI's head after being decapitated. These were kind of his interest. And then comes the next one is the Prophet Elias window. It's another light window. And just to say very few words about the Prophet Elias, the prefiguration is because he was put, God took him to heaven alive, like Christ. And he could reanimate deads and such a thing. And he had a pupil, not 12, but one, Joshua. And he gives his cloth to Elisha. He has Elisha. And this has nothing to do with the window. I just show it because he used the drawing of a letter in a manuscript around 1200 again of a P. And inside the P is the story of Elias being risen up to heaven. And he puts this in his window, P for Polke, prophet, lots of things you can imagine. And he has, this is three-dimensional, the glass is really a sculpture. And when the sun comes, it's towards south, it's in the south. So when the sun shines into this window, you cannot look at it. It's so strong, you are blinded by it. So he's thinking of Elisha going to the sound, you know. And another prefiguration of Christ, he's actually genealogically an ancestor, is King David. And Polke used a figure of Herodes for King David and showed him like a topographical thing, all green, all green. And she shows the singer on one side, and on the other side, the fighter with almost a gas mask, Che Guevara or something. It's this ambiguity of fight and killing, and on the other side, the muse. And it's all green, and there are blood and water elements in the topographical thing. And this is an image from Jerusalem. The second last is a very complex image of Abraham and Isaac also. God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son to show his faith and his belief. So Abraham goes with Isaac up and wants to kill him. There are helpers first, wants to kill him, and in the last second before striking, an angel comes, says, stop, I have a opfertier, animal to sacrifice. So he was saved. And Parkett took 4 parts out of this around, again, 11th century drawing, and made this absurd composition of Abraham hitting himself, blocking himself, whirling around himself, very critical thing. And it's just this big stain of blood, the opferti, the sacrifice. And Isaac is here also diagonally. It's like a kaleidoscope in all this of an absurd thing. And actually, this window is right behind the council, how you say, so that the priest has always this window in the neck. Be careful what you say to the people. These are elements, and also this angel who can just whirl around himself, not get to any part. And this is the very last of the 12 windows, and it's the same animal he used. He used for Abraham and Isaac, and this is the scapegoat. He used it as the scapegoat. And the scapegoat in Yom Kippur, you put all your sins and you send him to the desert, and you're clean. But here he cuts him in two and it comes back. So you cannot get rid of your sins and whatever. And Polke here is very, very sick, full of cancer. And he used his collection of tourmaline. He has about 19 tourmaline slices, which are very precious, these ones. He used them in the animal as like wounds or sins or whatever. It's like really his legacy. It's at the end, when he did all that, the people, while I was curating, they said, "Are you crazy? Do you know what all this will cost us?" And I said, "Just let him do. Let him do." And what happened at the end was that Sigmar gave his whole work and his whole collection of also very precious agates inside, the biggest, the nicest one, as a gift. As a gift, not to the church, but as a legacy to the world. I'm dying, and because also like it is opposite. This one is opposite to the Elias window, which looks also like a medal. No, which you have to pay tribute to go into another state, whatever it is, and this is kind of his tribute also, and. Yeah, there is a lot to be said about, but I don't go into details anymore. But let us open.
We talked so much today about Poland and Protestantism, Catholicism, and I think this, he was born in Schlesien, which is Poland. He came from extreme Protestant family, which nobody knew. And then I think this is basically the common momentum between the Catholics and the Protestants, which means anti-Semitism. I think this was very important for him personally to say, I donate this as an example of his generation. You see, this is it sounds a little bit pathetic, but this is the price for Auschwitz. I think it's very clearly das Unschuldslamm, right? The scapegoat.
Triangles. The triangles.
Yeah.
The triangles that you see there, obviously.
Because there was a very strong understanding between Catholics and Protestants that the evil were the Jews from a theological point of view, right? There was no conflict. There was an agreement. During the Nazi time, the Protestant and the Catholic officially agreed with the Nazis. You see? This is the official reading. So from a theological point, there are plenty of arguments from a theological point of view. This is interesting. Sigmar Polke was commissioned to do windows for a Romanesque church in Köln. And the Archbishop of Köln, who was from Silesia, kept on visiting Sigmar, and Sigmar had no interest in a Catholic bishop, but he wanted to visit Sigmar because he was from Schlesien, but he was a Catholic Silesian, right? So he was very interested in Catholic lies and mythology, and sometimes they would go to the same shop where you can buy little holy pictures and so on, and that's where the cardinal went too. So it was a kind of a Faustian deal, right? He was as older he became, he was interested in Goya, he was interested in painting and alchemy, and he always made fun of an old friend of his, Gerhard Richter. And they are kind of opposites.
But aren't you in a way saying that in this way also Polke turned something that stems from a religious question and a religious background into a political statement? If you say it's kind of like a debt, paying back a debt for Auschwitz?
I don't know. I knew him for a long time. We never were friends. He was a very kind of distant person. However, I think he always avoided being kind of on a daily level political. He was truly political, and he probably was very interested, truly religious too. But that didn't mean he had any sympathy for the church, and he had no sympathy for dogmatic political people. I never heard him making a statement, but he would make paintings dealing with communism in Switzerland and showed it in West Germany. So he made himself very unpopular here and there, and then he was happy.
Yeah.
But this is probably one of the most beautiful works of the 20th century. It's like Matisse Découpé, which is also fantastic. You are in a church, and you are very happy to be a church, even if you are agnostic. It's fantastic. And this is the same with Sigmar. He's not polemical. He's not against the church. he is just in favor of God, so to speak, but God doesn't belong to anybody. I mean, maybe sentimental, but...
Well, we are supposed to say something. I'm a little bit out of it because I'm an agnostic. So I want to turn back to your statement before that aesthetics is more important than content.
Yeah.
But still, somehow aesthetics are kind of the medium of what is said, including all the ambivalences Polke has built into this program. And I wonder if we could reflect a little bit on how could good art in church can happen today. And we have two examples. We have Polke, we have Richter, and they deal with it in a very different way. Polke is producing signifiers on different levels of abstraction, let's say. So this is not so much of an abstraction. This is more like a little symbol. It's illustrative. It's also a little bit like, by the way, aesthetically spoken. But the Agate windows are abstractions. And they also are ornaments. And so he works at a lot of crossroads of formats and aesthetics, and I think that makes him a possibility in church for people who are agnostic like me.
But you see, when you went to Afghanistan, and many other artists as well, he was completely embedded there, right? The photographs he took. And he received a prize which he didn't accept in Israel. And I happened to be there a number of times, and then I was approached to talk to Mr. Polke, since we knew each other, we didn't know each other well. And then he was very clearly, he said, no, I would like to have the money, it's a lot of money, however, I don't think it's such a good idea that Israel is a religious state. So he did not make a statement against the existence of Israel. He just said, I don't think it's a good idea that it's a religious state. And then he was just handed me a very good joint, which was kind of an homage to Jerusalem being Muslim, Christian, Jewish, world religion. So he was very cynical, skeptical, but at heart he was a very good person. You know, he was
Very spiritual.
yeah, very emphatic person. He really would give money to people who had none without anybody seeing him doing it. At the same time, he would take a bill of 500 marks, which was so much money, in a ground of lots of people, mostly younger artists, and using this as a fidibus, as a candle, to light a cigarette. People hoped that he would give them money. And so he was very cruel, extremely cruel, but it was also a true biblical lesson. Go to work if you need money. Don't hustle me. So it was very proud, but it was very cruel in a biblical sense, right? Very archetypal.
What?
No,
you
because
said
your work connects there, I think.
yeah. That I'm, you know, for me it's hard to say about the works which I haven't seen in real, and I know it only for the slides and for the first time in life, as I was not an expert in Sigmar Polke works. That's why I, with pleasure, am listening to the stories which you share with us.
But still, to speak, because we're still moving in the context of either religious art, but well, I would call this rather art in a religious place and referring to religious history. And I wonder, as an artist referring to that, I don't even know, have you ever been in this?
As we know from what Kasper said, you don't have to be religious to make the work which will be in the place dedicated to religion. So I think that this work, you know, is a serious research, and every serious artist makes the serious research. And then the pleasure of using the materials which are very decorative, beautiful. But this is a moment when kind of the wisdom, because wisdom of the artist is the way of using the tools. So that's why I can say that makes sense for me, more sense than the work by Gerhard Richter, which I've seen recently in Cologne for the first time months ago.
And Jacqueline is
Polke there.
Yes, and we have Jan van
that
Eyck
was-
mentioned by the Luc Tuymans. That's most important work for him.
When I was, I don't know, a little anecdote. Recently I was, wouldn't believe it, in a museum. And I was looking in Hamburg, Kunsthalle, and I was just going through the collection, and I started with Jan van Eyck and Italian Trecento, Quattrocento art, and it all was sacred. And then I passed into the post-Reformation period, and then I realized afterwards I have so much against a certain type of art that is religious in newer centuries, but I didn't have anything against all this pre-Reformation art. Aesthetically speaking, it was just kind of ravishing. I mean, Jan van Eyck, Simone Martini, Cimabue, you name them. And then it occurred to me that perhaps this kind of sacred art, which has been made in a time when church was not put into any doubt. So this was sacred art without any doubt. And with the Reformation comes the schisma and the doubt, and the competition and counter-Reformation and propaganda fide and propaganda. We had this today too, we talked about propaganda. And then everything for art practice changes. If I think of these saints painted by people like Guido Reni, you know, looking up into the sky and being so oily, and so, I mean, I'm not talking as a scientist right now, I just don't like the stuff. I mean, Tiepolo is nice, but I don't like all those sugary saints, because they are trying to convince people of something. They are kind of playing to, they are manipulative. And I think this is coming into, I want to jump now, a really enormous jump. We've been talking about art being manipulative or not. And I have the feeling that art has been used recently in a ways that makes it manipulative, because curators are programming huge moralistic demands art has to fulfill. And I think I name one of them, I call him the Holy Adam. So Holy Adam is commissioning art and looking for art that is fulfilling certain types of demands, which for me very often border on the proto-religious. And artists, young artists, give in to this. They cater to it, they produce it. And they produce exclamation mark art. And I think propaganda fide also produces exclamation mark art. And this is not exclamation mark art. So this has the doubt incorporated. Basta.
And there are these wonderful... Shall we stop now?
You see, this is made for people who don't read, who don't write, right? Mm-hmm. And it tells a very intense story.
Yes.
The lamb and also the golden lamb, right? Der Tanz das goldene Lamm. Every child understands that. They have a greedy grandfather, they have a wicked aunt, or whatever. It's greed, there are certain sins, and when you see art which was done in 1908 or 9 or 10 in Mexico, which is revolutionary painting for people telling what is the quality of education, of medication, of medical, they have this strength too, you see, because they are telling something for everybody without excluding anybody. And in a sense, you have that also with a very kind of theological art of Mondrian, of Malevich, of fantastic, beautiful abstract art. It has a manifest strength. Now, our present dilemma, yes, the curators are part of it, and the business are part of it, and a lot of mediocre artists are part of it. This is another thing.
So we don't care.
However, what happens is that Richter as well as Polke, people who are now would be mid-80s or something like that, for some amazing reason were able to make the best work in a place which is not a museum, which doesn't cost any money. Anybody can go there. Nobody tells you not to go there. In the Cologne's Cathedral, they have now a feast once a year, which used to be in Spain, now it's in Köln, of gypsies, Roma and Sinti. And they love that, Richter, because it is so elementary, just color, just light, no iconographic, and they are super Catholic, but they love it. They're really imagined by it. It's like, so this is fantastic that the art has become like a business in itself, and our modernism was a heroic fight to liberate yourself from the priests, from the bishops and the counts and the kings and all of that, and now it's part of the business, which is more difficult than being part of the church. So this is a phenomenon. I mean, we are talking here about a museum which will open, and this is I was thinking about it, strange that a museum wants to focus on feminism, on East European art, is not in Poznan, and not in Gdansk, and not in Warsaw, and Krakow, or wherever, but in an area which is ideal, beautiful nature, wealthy people, all of this. And then I remembered actually about an experience which you were involved in, when Catalan had the Pope coming down in the Kunsthalle in Basel. It was a fantastic piece because it was inspired by this quasi-religious space, and it had an enormous pathos, like a great opera. And you seen Wojtyla on the ground. And it was not a joke. It was about a wonder, a positive and negative. And then you showed it in Poland, which I talked to Catalan, don't do this. You are going to insult a whole group of people where Catholicism and nationalism are positively elements, even though they're also repressive. And there was a huge scandal, and I had a sympathy for the people who were scandalized, because I have a very religious background, and I left the church. So I'm not defending the church, but I'm defending the soul of the normal people. A couple of years ago, in the Dutch television, the nephew of Van Gogh talked about Muslims in a generalized way as goat fuckers. Think about your grandmother who is telling you, you are a member of goat fuckers, no matter what religion you are. So we have to be much more respectful to the belief of individuals, not the belief of churches and of organizations. And I think this is something which we have to learn, to respect the feeling of others. For instance, the caricatures the Danish made, they were very offensive. Even though you can defend them, you have to defend them, because the freedom of press is such a high value. But we have lost our sensitivity in relationship to pornography, in relationship to even the political correctness becomes crazy sometimes. It does not have any sensitivity towards respect of others. So, therefore, I think
Kasper,
Balka's art is very important. We should talk about Balka's work.
Wait a second. I need to answer, because you mixed up two things. This was not my exhibition, but the one I commissioned with Harry Zeman. And there was idea of Harry Zeman and his project.
But it was not a good idea.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Once I learned what is he going to do, I sent him the letter, which is in the archive, so you can see it in LA. Warning him, telling, listen, the exhibition is in Poland. Poland is a Catholic, not the state, but country. There will be a scandal. There was just after the scandal with the Nazis of Uklański, just the next exhibition after that. And I said, think over what you are showing, because I'm going to lose my job. And he answered, you don't blackmail me, because either or you agree for Catalan or I don't do that show. So I said, I'm not going to censor you, because I was fighting the whole my life against the censorship. So go your way. And I take the whole risk. This was how it happened. So
I'm
being...
sorry. I didn't want to make this into a personal issue.
Yeah, no, but if you address it to me, it wasn't... I had the choice either not to make the Harry Zeman show and censor his work and Marzitio Catalan, or let it be. So I decided, let it be. That's it.
You didn't want to react, but you wanted to come back to this before.
Balka should talk.
Maybe Balka should go. Okay,
No,
so should talk. I should talk a little bit, yes, but it was many words, wise words, which happened to be here in the company of these few flies which woke up, and I think it's also so nice that we warm up the atmosphere, that some flies are around. But the subject, maybe I come to the roots of this symposium, because the subject of this interested me so much. As a visual artist who grew up in the Catholic tradition, I also find the line between two parts of, so far, my artistic activity. The first one, which I could call Catholic one, which took place between 1980 and 1990 for 10 years, when I based my artistic presence and activity on the Catholic iconography. And since 1990, I could call the part of my artistic activity Protestant activity, when the image disappeared. And being prepared for this symposium, I wrote some words which I thought there will be chance to discuss and subjects, but probably it will be, as I'm 100% sure that there will be no time to do it, so I just read you very briefly. However, I cannot read very fast, but I will try my best. Just some words which I prepared.
But please, if anyone wants to react to them, we do have time.
If, yes. Vid stos, vid stworz. 1520, Limewood. Virgin and a child, suffering Christ, leaning bust in the windows. Tillman Riemenschneider, Lukas Cranach-Older, Grünewald, modern freestanding sculpture. Michelangelo Buonarroti, David, 1505, Dying Slave, 1519, Atlas, 1516. Leonardo da Vinci, died 1519. Horse and Rider, 1508. Dürer, Melancholy, 1515. 1492, Discovery of America by Columbus. Vasco da Gama, Magellan. Copernicus, 1543, Nuremberg. Book Against Illiteracy, Gutenberg, 1471. First Censorship of Church of Books, 1486. Thomas Tallis. Landscape as an Altar. High Mountains Replacing Presence of God. Pulpit Exchanging Altar. Aesthetic Form of Christianity. Olymp, Zeus and the Others. St. Adalbert, Remembrance of the First Holy Communion. Oasis, Caspar David Friedrich. Good God, When You Wet the Bed. How It Is, Purgatory, Doubts, Bambi, Winterreise, B. I Treat Objects with Respect. Thank you.
Thank you. I find it interesting that the one returning word in this panel, but also before, is doubt, which is historically seen, it's not necessary only close to Protestantism, also Catholic with Thomas von Aquin, and you have doubt as a quality and as a category. But I would like to, like for instance, from you, I would like to know what was with Polke, with the very first of the images that is about doubt. And I have a slight feeling that this is also the one where Laurie Anderson, standing in front of it, had this revelation of being proud to be Protestant because these are the people who doubt. Is that true?
Yeah, that's completely true. I mean, you talked about the St. Cunibert windows with the Catholic people he had in Cologne. He didn't want to really do it at the end, and he did the Protestant church because they knew what they wanted, and it had to be like that, and so they were much more strict. And he had this wonderful pastor, a woman, Cathy Laroche, who he was talking to on eye level. And when he was very, very, very sick and he knew he was going to die, he asked this pastor to do his ceremony when he's dead. So, I mean, she did that. This is a sign of such an intense and positive relation. And he could tell her about all those doubts. It's a lot of for the Catholic, it is heretic elements in his windows there.
What was unusual of Polke, he would hire experts, young or experienced art historians, to do research for him. He would pay them well, and he was a very wonderful person when it came to antiquarian booksellers. They loved him. He knew what he was looking for, and if they found what he wanted, he would pay extra. So he was like a true artist. He accepted the knowledge of other people, and he depended on them. He hired people to do research for him. He even worked with chemists who had certain experience with color, which was forgotten for 400 years, and it was very dangerous because now everything is kind of chemical.
Safe,
yeah. Yeah. So he was really into research.
So more, almost like a scientist.
Yeah, it's a kind of, also the artist as Unternehmer, how do you say that?
As a businessman.
Yeah, as a businessman, you invest in order to, you can't make an invention unless you invest in research, right? So he was old-fashioned in that.
When your work costs a lot, you have money to make this kind of research by the others. So it's good that you spend the money for this, because you are a wiser artist, and I think the image of the artist as just as a painter or sculptor, it's gone. And it's good.
And he was very late in making money, and he always wanted to have money in cash.
It was even wiser than today.
He didn't
but
believe
it was
in
possible.
funny deals. You know, I do this for you, you do.
But when we are talking about Polke, Polke told me one time that his father was a religious maniac, religious fanatic. And he grew up with this father who went to the people talking about God. And when, and after 1945, when Soviet soldier came to Schlesien, where he was living, so he went with his father, and he was forced. He was 5 or 6 years old at the time, so he went with his father to these Soviet soldiers. His father had the accordion, and they were singing songs, and the father was trying to convert this soldier to believe in God. So, and he was telling me it was such a paradox situation, and he was also saying since that time he's allergic against this religious fanaticism on one side, and on the other side against all kinds of ideology like the Soviet soldiers. And I think this, we are talking about these windows, so somehow these backgrounds make many things clear. And I think also that when he did these windows, he was dying already, and it was also some kind of gift to his father. It was my feeling at the time.
I was thinking, getting away a little bit, I was thinking if Polke would have been working for any kind of church, and I think he would not, and I think it might be good if we think now about artists getting involved with the church as an institution, as a commissioner of art, what kind of context would an artist like to insert him or herself? This church has been not simply a church commission, this church is a public space. It's a burger space, it's a space for citizens. And I think that is a great difference to what might happen, for example, in the Vatican, because I've heard that the Vatican Museum has now a female director, and she might commission work by...
And not only this, also the Pope has publicly announced that he wants the church to go back into the commissioning business. Or into
it will never happen, because it was interrupted so much. If there would have, you see, for instance, an artist like Walter de Maria would have been the ideal artist for the Vatican.
They don't understand.
He would have been a great artist for the Vatican. Brancusi would have been a great artist. They lost the momentum, and they'll never gain it back. You cannot, once your love is gone, you cannot reconstruct it. That was a fantastic, the Baroque was a propaganda against Protestantism, and the Baroque is such a wonderful form of artificiality, which many of us don't like.
But why do you think they can't get that momentum back?
Well, that was what I was aiming at, saying we have to look at what kind of public space these church institution offers. So if you get commissioned by the Vatican, you finish in a museum, and you have a Vatican hierarchy behind it, you have the Vatican dogma behind it, you have propaganda fide behind it, and then you are constrained. So there is no space, public space determined by a certain kind of citizenship behind it. I know that the citizens of Basel also have a past of religious dogmatism, of iconoclasm and all that, but that doesn't seem to be happening anymore. So I hope that artists will be very conscious of what kind of public space and who determines the space are working for.
I made, for example, few works in this sanctuary which could be placed or which could find the home at the church. However, I'm not practicing, but because those works are related with the sins, so I'm afraid they wouldn't be wanted by the church. So
your contribution in Sonsbeek, which was a long time ago, was amazing. It was an abstract sculpture, but at the same time, there was a Battle of Arnhem, and there was, I don't know, 25,000 soldiers killed within 2 days. they were from Canada, they were from Poland, they were from England, from America, from New Zealand. All those fought against the Nazis, right? And that was the battle on the Rhine. And he had a work which was not immediately connected, but the association was very clear.
Because associations are much more important than the direct understanding of things. But I think that Vatican, the structure of the church nowadays, it's based on very hard ground. There is no space for the doubts, and once we start to discuss this subject, I think the space for the doubts is in the gaps between the works, the words and the works. So, and I don't think that church needs these doubts and gaps.
I was trying to respond to both what Susanne earlier said about your experience when you went to the Kunsthalle and you had this sudden thought that, well, there was a time before doubt and one after, and then there was this kind of propaganda, let's say.
It came out aesthetically positive.
Yes.
Aesthetically. I
Yes.
just feel
But I think it points to also what the significance of the time of Luther is, I think, and some kind of almost uncanny parallels to our times, in the sense that there was a very clear hierarchy of information. I mean, it was the church who disseminated information, and it was the church who disseminated the artists to illustrate that information, to put it very kind of blandly. I mean, Michelangelo, Raphael, that was propaganda too, and it was very well-made propaganda, and it was beautiful propaganda, but it was the pinnacle of this attitude of basically illustrating the power of the church. And then in 16th century, this kind of eroded, because not least because of Luther, and it was not least because of new means of technology to disseminate information. Talking about digital, you know, in terms of how, let's say, 20th century, the power of the media, of the mass media, was kind of either taken for granted or criticized as a big conspiracy, which is still, of course, criticized as. And then we have a moment of ugly collapse, which we're currently experiencing, where this kind of sort of, let's say, I wouldn't call it a monopoly, but a kind of concentration of dissemination of information has collapsed to the effect that there's a lot of, you know, post-truth, etc. And I think around the time of Luther, including Luther himself, when you think about what he said about Jews, for example, or how he reacted to the peasants' uprising, was very much about, you know, manipulating what is seen as truth in a kind of new war of information made possible by Gutenberg and by the circulation of information, and of course also by this very, in itself, emancipatory act of translation. But I think this points, to come back to the role of the artist, is that within that we don't have to ask ourselves, how can we now decorate the Vatican? But we have to ask ourselves, what is now what artists are doing in terms of illustrating power? Yeah? I mean, for me, for example, when I ask myself, for example, when I saw Jean-Louis David's Napoleon on the horse, you know, which is the perfect illustration of power. You know, you go to the emperor and you paint him on a big stallion, you know, and it looks beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and I wonder what's the current, and I felt the current sort of equivalent for me of that is Andreas Gurski making a photograph of the racing, Formula One racing course of the Emirates, you know, or somehow making also the power of the masses a kind of experience of the sublime. And then, of course, the next step is to think about, yeah, decorating a bank, I think is the current equivalent to working for the Vatican, I think.
But you see, somebody like Polke made a work where he had X-rays made of Goya, right? The Goya in Madrid. He had all these abstract kind of figurations of Dürer, right? Which he also invested a lot of research and made these wonderful decors, but nobody picked up on it because it was just art. So it will be probably recognized in 20 or 30 years. And there was one particular man, he was an Abbé Couturier, he was a Benedictine, a French kind of poor Catholic working for the streets. He was a socialist, a humanist Catholic, and he started to interest artists in being involved in the church, not in particular churches. So Corbusier was one, Montchamp happened because of that, and then the chapel of Matisse happened that way too. And then eventually, that was a kind of an example for the collection of Demolier in Texas, where Roscoe was asked for kind of a chapel of all different religions, you know, Buddhists, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and so on. But then it disappeared again, and then the art world sort of took over, you see? Then the Roscoe became a kind of paintings for that restaurant next to the Corbusier, the Mies van der Rohe building in New York. So the idea, it wasn't sexy anymore, but it could happen again. And it was not the idea of the Protestant Church of Switzerland, it was a particular person who was intelligent and open, right? The women who made it possible to commission Sigmar, or to commission the idea of a new window, no?
Some women were involved.
Yeah. And so it can happen. I mean, this museum, we'll see, it's an unusual kind of constellation, interesting program, but the proof is in the pudding. We'll see in 10 years or 15 years what comes out of it. And the idea, I mean, this is what the problem I have. Why isn't it possible to have such a wonderful situation somewhere where it's necessary, in Poland or so, where it is like, not just within this monopoly of Kaczynski and Catholic Church and all that, but where there is a kind of movement. But why not here? It's also part of the world. It's just beautiful, you know, light and mountains and so on. And maybe something will come out of here which is fantastic. So we are happy to be here, to be invited. I'm not against the idea of the religion. So when people complain, I'm not taking money from Deutsche Bank, but I'll take it from the Communist Party. So what? What's the difference? What's finding the difference? Money is money. There's no such a thing as good money or bad money. It's what you do with it.
I mean, this is a good call for responsibility in the end. And it's funny that I also thought, like, after this discussion we had here today, and especially after this last hour, I wanted to, I mean, it's a call that you made a couple of years ago already, Kasper, where you said, like, you wish for art to be a transmission belt to celebrate the complexity of the world and not to make it more simple. And I think this could rule for art in religious places, but also elsewhere. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for speaking.